No escucho. No escucho, no escucho. Hola, no oigo, no oigo. No oigo, no oigo. Auditorium. I welcome the Secretary General of the Inter-American Conference of Social Security, Professor Álvaro Velarca Hernández. Please, Secretary General. Thank you so much, Roberto. And please be welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of Professor Zoe Robledo Aburto, President of this Inter-American Conference of Social Security, I want to welcome you all to this panel on challenges of Social Security and the exchanges about care and Social Security in America, organized by the conferences and the Global Alliance for Care. I greet the audience that are here with us today who is following live streaming. I want to thank the Alliance and joint construction about the Social Security. I also want to thank the President of Women, Annalyn Gassman, and at a world level, thank you so much. And also Len Sanz, representative of In Mujeres in Mexico, for co-sharing the alliance, and also the participation and the presence of Teresa Aguirre for the knowledge. Dr. Karina Battiani, Executive Secretary of the Latin American Council of Social Sciences, CLACSO, a very renowned expert of care at national level. This is one panel, one more of the joint series of seminars that we have done with CLACSO, and I also thank for the participation of Dr. Laura Pautasi, the keynote speaker. She's from Argentina, and she can open new fronts on the area of research, which are so numerous and complexes. And also the one that are here with us, the representatives of different institutions of Social Security that are here with us today, and that will share even very briefly the care of agenda of care in the respective countries. Virginia Marlene Garcia Reyes from the National Institute of Social Security of Cuba, the INASS. Thank you so much and welcome to the conference. Kenya Mariana Ramirez Masache, on the director and in charge of the Ecuadorian Institute of Social Security. Jose Adolfo Flamenco Jao, president of the Guatemalan Institute of Social Security. Welcome to Mexico, my dear Julio, and also to thank Natalie Martel, Director of International Policies and agreements of employment and social development in Canada. Thank you, Kim Tudor, as well, for your participation as representatives of the member institutions of this conference. And this is very important as a way of articulating the political spheres, academic spheres, and management spheres related with care and social security. Now, we are here with the objective of debating and impelling a new way of understanding Social Security and also the work of care. We need to put on the table the support that supposes for all the systems of Social Security the great quantity of work which is not paid, and in a very overwhelming way. And a regional debate that requires everything. So this Inter-American Conference of Social Security were very willing to contribute in a very strong fashion to a paradigm change that will set on the center of the public actions the care and the people that they care for. Without further ado, I want to go to the interventions foreseen in the panel, and thank you again for your participation in the event, and I invite you to continue with the CISS and the topics that are in our working agenda. And I want to give the floor to the moderator and researcher of our home, Lourdes. So please go ahead, and thank you so much for this great exchange of ideas and opportunities. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, for your words and for the side commitment on this conference, the focus of gender and the perspective of rights. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the panel that we have called Challenges of Social Security, the Work of CARES. My name is Lourdes, and I am a specialist of the Inter-American Conference of Social Security, and for me it's an honor and also a pleasure, Laura Jimenez, and I want to moderate this historical panel for this institution that it's its 80th anniversary, none more, none less. So we have had to wait for 8 decades in order to talk about CARES and Social Security, but we are on this debate in order to put on the table the positive implications, but also negative implications that the sign of Social Security for many population groups has, and specifically for women. As the Secretary General was saying, this panel is organized by the Conference and the Global Alliance, a community that looks to transform the culture and reduce inequalities with the reduction and distribution of domestic work and care. And the alliance was launched by the National Institute of Mexican Women within Mujeres in the framework of the Generation for Equalities. And this is a joint effort that it's an action in order to advance and position the care agenda in the political part of the region and the Institute of Social Security that are part of this conference. Thank you to each and every one of the persons that accepted to participate in this panel personally and also remotely. And of course, thank you so much to the people that are here in this wonderful venue and those of you that are following us in social media. So as you will know, this is within Mujeres, accepting the availability of time and also the quality of life for the unproportionate load that we observe in the domestic space of this work. The raising of sons and daughters, the housing work like ironing and cleaning the house and whatnot, and also the management of time in order to take ahead all these activities that, as you all know, are fundamental for maintenance. One of the most problematic aspects that people that devote exclusively to the work of non-paid works is that they do it completely unprotected. What do I mean by this? Okay, I think that the greater of the cases that the ones that care exclusively may not access to the benefits of Social Security, they don't have access to health benefits. They face the challenge of suffering economic poverty in the old age because they are not part of the formal working market, so they don't have the contributions or the demanded quota by the contributed systems, a greater series of social resources, and that is not remunerated, and they are excluded of the protection of Social Security, and they have contributed with the welfare and the sustainability of the families and also the society as a whole. But not everything are bad news. And in spite of this paradoxical relationship, the CEPAL in many studies have good news, and we have certain evolution and transformation. At present, we have experiences of public policies in Latin America, and we are trying to compensate the people that are devoted to the care tasks, and they want to include them in the systems of Social Security. In this panel, we come to have an exchange of the scope of these initiatives, of these policies, and why not to also define which is the relationship between care and Social Security. I would like to highlight that we must not overlook these implications that the traditional design of this has on many, many groups, the migrants, the people that work in informality, among others. In order to start to this part of the panel, I want to pass the floor to the president of the National Institute of Women, Dr. Annalyn Gassman. She is the professor in public health by the University at Harvard and a surgeon by the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She has 4 decades of a very important professional experience in the public and private sector, in the organizations of civil societies, and of course, in international organizations. Thank you so much, Mrs. President, for the enormous contribution, the enormous work that as of your leadership you have achieved in the agenda of care. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I have a presentation, but first I want to thank the organization of this panel, which is so important. I want to thank you, General Secretary Álvaro del Arca. Congratulations for the 18th anniversary of this Inter-American Conference of Social Security, and thank you so much for the invitation of this so important and historical space. Astonishingly historical, because I cannot believe that 8 decades have gone by in order to be able to talk about care. For the government of Mexico, for the 4th transformation government, we have set a very important emphasis in the inclusion, in acknowledgement, and not to leave anyone behind or outside. And we have always understood that it's very important for the strategies of economic and social recovery of the country that they have a perspective of gender and human rights, and also contributing to equality. In the National Institute of Women, we are the institution of the policy of equality. This institution that is devoted to transversalize the gender perspective. And we did this by listening to women, by listening to their needs, where the topic of care was very clear. It was extremely central to the demands that women in our country have, along with the economic autonomy and the prevention of violence, and to live in peace. This is why, in our role of co-organizers of the Forum Generation and Equality and a part of the Coalition for Economic Justice and the Economic Rights of the Forum, launched the Global Alliance for Care, because we think that this demand is not a demand of Mexican women, but a demand of feminism of so many years ago. And this is one of the most important challenges that we have. And the pandemic itself, and the importance that they have. Just to put into context, when we talk about care, we are referring the activities that generate every day and with generation the physical welfare and emotional welfare of people. So this is the daily work, as they said very well. This generates welfare, and this allows that we work as a societies, that the people live okay, and that they develop the work of care, their activities that and relationships that are needed in order to take care of all the aspects of life, and everyone in a given moment have needed or will need care. This is why it's so important to recognize the work of care. First, it's a job to sustain life and to reproduce the workforce and societies, and also as a fundamental contribution to the economic production and the development and welfare. And with this importance, we sustain that it's very impressive that we have this naturalization. It's maybe sometimes invisible. We do it tactically with women, and of course, the topic of patriarchy and machismo comes to play. We have sustainability in the framework of human rights. This is part of what we pose to ourselves in the framework of the objectives of sustainable development. So the proposal that we have in Mexico, what we're working, is that we are working hand in hand with the Mexican Institute of Social Security, with the Secretary of Labor, with the welfare, with the legislative power, is to understand the topic of care as part of the system of social protection, to put it as another pillar besides education, health, social security, and to acknowledge the care and how this pillar that we lack is there, and it's not very well known, it's not paid, and it's not redistributed. And of course, the idea, which is really to walk towards systems that will emphasize in acknowledging, redistribute the core responsibility of care, not only on the shoulders of men and women, but also inside the families, in the communities, in the society, with the private sector, and that obviously the governments have a lot to say. Now, I only want to talk a little bit about health, and the contribution that this does, the care of taking care of the health of people are essential factors in order to understand the demands of care. In the region, the homes should suffer a very important part of health care that people require in order to recover from their diseases or accidents. The cost, either monetary or time that should be in the continuum of care, and it should be part of what we do in these topics. It goes to the home, and depending on the socio-economical condition and other conditions of home, they generate diverse strategies of response. But almost all the strategies is almost every strata reprogram the life of women and young women, elderly women, and of course, in reality, they go and set some time.
Women in Mexico work 3 times more than men when it comes to caregiving, but particularly in this segment of healthcare services or healthcare, us women work 12.2 hours and males 6.7 hours. So we work twice the time that men do, and the workload is multiplied on us for us. But it's important when we correlate the situation to a value or the GDP, or we monetize it. Care at home or household chores reported 4.6 billion pesos. That's almost 28% of the gross domestic product. So in reality, I mean, there's no industry that produces this percentage. Out of this 28%, I'll tell you that women provide a 20%. And the proposal of the national system of care has planned out, the fact that labor care and who provides those services, require the elements of quality. All the subjects require services of quality. People who are disabled, kids, girls, boys, the elders, or seniors, people in general. We need this to trigger economic growth. We're going to talk about the other initiative that correlates to the economic growth. And lastly, we've observed in Mexico, and what we've done in the Institute is, the care system has an impact on how we build peace and safety and the decline of violence exercised against women. If we distribute the care and we have more males caring for others, and there's in our findings information, objective data, we know that caregiving men are more empathic, less violent. And here I want to stop just a second to speak about the economic growth of things. We analyze the care sector. The care sector is a releasing sector. It releases women. It gives them more time. People could be employed in the regulated workplaces, be part of the workforce and obtain all the benefits. It's like a segment of industry that must be developed. We need to change the focus. We need to train our people. We need to have professionals. Training requires investment. We need to invest in our women because that will enable or catalyze us. At CEPAL, there is that initiative. That sector has to be taken care of. The work or caregiving has to be paid for as well. That's part of what catalyzes economic growth. And the second point is something that Tere Guerra will speak of, and I think it's worth our while to mention it twice. In reality, the National Labor Care System is an investment. It's not an expenditure, and it's an intelligent investment. And as you can see, the investment is not that enormous. We have a system for child daycare that's universal, of quality. That's what UN Women specifies, along with CEPAL in Mexico. We have 1.6% of the GDP invested, but the return of the investment would be of 1.77, and that would generate 4% more job opportunities. So it's a good investment. That's good business. And we have hard data of the other sample of the demographics for our elders where, the creation of job opportunities for them could be greater. And just to wrap up now, I'm sure that my colleagues might be a bit nervous here at the panel, but we're facing challenges. That balance or fairness really is a challenge. We need to face the challenge head on. We know that there's an unfair conditions at the workplace. We need to really consider labor of care. We need to foster and make it possible for women to enter and work in all the sectors. We need to broaden the scope or broaden the professional fields of health, and we want to have a formal creation of jobs and opportunities. We must improve the quality of those opportunities, specifically in the healthcare system. That's what we're talking about today here. But we have to build the right economics for labor of care too. We have to all promote that global economy. Women should have access to, in an equalitarian base, to have, we must have access to technology, innovation, and opportunities. We're facing a double challenge here. On one side, we have to draft public policies that include everyone, that could be the response that could lead us to satisfy the needs of our people in the present and in the future. We know that our aging population is also one of the elements that could be solved. We need sustainable job opportunities, and if we work this way, with a system, we can find that alternative. Julieta spoke about the global partnership for caregiving, or for labor of care. We're living in the present. Historically, this present is extremely important, as I've said. We have many countries that have fought for feminism amidst the pandemic too, and the pandemic has become a major life experience for each and every one of us. Now, our calling for the global caregiving partners in ONU Mujeres, or UN Women, and the National Mexican Institute of Women in Mujeres. I mean, we've all learned together so much. Collectively, we can face the challenges. We have to plan out what we're going to exercise. We have to now continue practicing this. You're going to hear from my colleague Laura more information about this. We need a systematic way to support labor of care. We have been very successful after a year of partnerships. We're 78 members, and we work with national government, the local governments, and different NGOs, the private sector, philanthropists, stakeholders, and multilateral agencies and United Nations programs. Here, I'm going to close my participation today by thanking this Inter-American Conference. You're a partner. Thank you for being so active and working with us. You're fully engaged with us as an institution. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for uniting and becoming part of this alliance of labor of care. It's a great step in our history. We're building civilization, and we are acknowledging and redistributing and paying for what sustains our life, which is care. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Gassman. You're the president of the National Institute of Women in Mexico. We're going to listen to Teresa Guerra. She's in charge of statistics and representative of UN Women sociologists, thanks to National Autonomous University. She's worked at UNIFEM and different agencies for 15 years. She's been part of UN Women. She has obtained data of statistics, gender issues, violence against women. She's worked in America, Latin America, the Caribbean. Thank you, Teresa, for all your hard work and participating in this panel. Thank you for accepting. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all very much for inviting us. We thank you from UN Women. Thank you for inviting us to this important celebration. We want to jointly think about what's crucial here. It's labor of care and the challenges of Social Security. Now, I congratulate this conference. Thank you for celebrating this 80th anniversary. We thank you once again for sharing all the knowledge. Thank you for compiling all the data. This conference has been a great contributor that gives us guidance when drafting initiatives and provisions for Social Security improvements. Our acknowledgement to your institute, and we thank Mr. Álvaro Velarca Hernández, the General Secretary of the Inter-American Conference. Our acknowledgement to Roberto Martín and Jiménez and all the team that organized this event. I congratulate my panel members, Ms. Gassman, and those who are connected remotely. I'd like to thank all the countries that will share their presentations, share their their experiences, best practices, and the challenges that we all study from UN Women. We are expecting to continue listening to all your contributions. Thank you for that collective effort from all your countries. We're honored, but and we're, as Nadine said, we're part of the global labor of care. We're part of this partnership, and we want to center on care in this global projective or projects. We have collective actions to try to fight lack of equality, to guarantee that the labor of care is acknowledged and valued. And it's essential to make sure that the well-being in our society is improved. Our physical well-being should be improved if we center on care. If we integrate all of these elements with gender perspective, the systems of healthcare and social security can foster the transformation of this field. We want to provide services under the principle of equality, prioritizing children's rights, the dignified life of the elders without exclusion. We need to guarantee the rights of our people and have our disabled working in autonomy. Along with women's rights, women should also be autonomous and empowered economically and participate actively in politics and society. As it's been mentioned, if we call or summon women, women are usually held accountable and responsible of all the household chores and caregiving, which is labor. These are obstacles to women because women sometimes lose job opportunities of great quality and don't have access to benefits of Social Security. The data that we've obtained in Mexico showed that Nadine already gave you this number about the extra work that women have to take. It's labor of care. It's not just that women work at home 50 hours a week and males at home only work 19 hours a week. The total workload that women bear is like you add the house chores that are not paid. Women work and don't receive a wage. Women spend 6 hours more working than males. That workload has also effects on our women and women's access to work. Women usually work at home and don't receive a payment, and that Nadine said that women contribute with a 28% if we estimate what happened in 2020. It's 28%. That's 28% of the GDP, and it's more than the manufacturing industry. That's more of the share percentage than is produced there. Women generate that, and that's a burden on our shoulders. But additionally, women and men don't have the same conditions. We don't have the same access to the work market or labor market. Women experience discrimination when, there's no equal opportunity employment. They receive less wage than men. An important data that reveals the following is that the wage gap there, due to gender issues, has to be narrowed. Women in Mexico, we're 50% of the population. Some of our women earn the minimum wage or less, and only 29% receives five salaries. So the measures have to be structural to change the labor market. Women usually work and are not regulated subjects. And the fact that they're not regulated, you see that women want to go back to the professional life and exercise their life, but they go back to the household. And there's a lack of security there for them. Now, I want to mention that women are affected by a situation of crisis, and I think that is something that it becomes a tangible. It's become a tangible with the COVID and the crisis. The CEPAL gave us some data. The impact of COVID in women, sets us back. It lags the development of women. It just we're analyzing our populations amidst a transition of this pandemic. A great number of the elders in our population are elders. I mean, we're gonna be more. We're aging. Our population are. We're all aging, and that need. I mean, we need to budget old age for those future generations too. We need to take care of those who today are taking care of us. And we ask ourselves those questions. Who's going to take care of the women who've taken care of everyone there? So we need to facilitate or enable those who suffer a disability. They need to have job opportunities too. We need to analyze this in generations, culturally speaking and territorially speaking. The lack of equality when distributing in labor of care. I mean, we need to guarantee the benefits of Social Security. There's other obstacles, there's other ways of discriminating that makes the situation of women even worse. There's women that are already vulnerable and are marginalized. There are specific sectors in a situation of great vulnerability, like the maids at the households that pay but are part of the segment of labor of care. We're talking about 18 million people in Latin America, 9 out of 10 women, and 78% of these women are unregulated when hired, with a low income, without access to Social Security. The data proves that these are just challenges that we are facing in the region, in all our countries. It's not just in a region, it's in the world. In America, you see, Nadine and the rest of the panel members have mentioned the advancement in the legislation, in laws and regulations, of course, and there's progress when there's groups of feminists constituted that are stronger, and there's stakeholders involved that communicate to government, as this partnership has created. There's government, the scholars, society, governments, public and private sectors are involved. So we have been capable of creating this general landscape to contemplate society as a whole. Because of justice, we need to be observers, and also due to survival. So we insist. We know that it's important for males and women to share the task of caring for others, where the state is also involved. The systems, the society, and other stakeholders and agencies are a pillar to strengthen and improve the articulation and correlation of all the agencies to have an impact in the segment of women. And I repeat, it's important to invest in the labor of care. We need to invest to break a negative circle of poverty and exclusion. That circle could become a positive cycle that generates social returns of investment with triple dividends, or what's accrued. If we invest, there is an impact in our kids and the well-being of our kids, and on all the other sectors that have specific needs, and the whole life cycle of care. But we promote the investment of care, whether you generate job opportunities of quality, and we facilitate the participation of women in the labor market. There's a return of income for the government in their federal level or local level, and it's easier for people to then obtain some economic benefit. As a conclusion, at UN Women, we reiterate our support. We have a clear roadmap. We want to continue working for the progress of our economies. We want to create programs for Social Security benefits. We need to find the best paths for it. Thanks to this conference for enabling us to open this dialogue, understand best practices to progress in the collective to guarantee these fundamental rights. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Teresa Guerra. You're in charge of statistics and UN Women. So there's so many things in common. Thank you for being present as a representative. We've been talked about caregiving and peace, as Ms. Gazman mentioned, the president of the National Women's Institute. Teresa spoke about the return of investment, and an investment that is not just an expenditure. In the speech or the narrative, they want us to believe that it's just an investment, but it's a return. With this panel of experts, we open the floor for Karina Batiani. She's the secretary of Latin American Council of Social Sciences at CLASCO. Thank you so much, Ms. Batiani, for your hard work and for your contributions at a regional scale. Karina, the floor is yours. Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to greet you all. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invite. I thank this conference and the Global Partnership of Care and this labor of care. Thank you for enabling me to share what I'm going to share with you. I greet you all, and I thank you for enabling me to be part of this panel. I thank Nadine, Teresa, of course, Laura, who we're going to listen to in a few minutes. We thank the General Secretary of this conference, and we congratulate you for your 80th anniversary. I believe that this subject, it's extremely important and it's urgent. There's some points, and I will give you a bit of a head start with the information. I mean, Nadine and Teresa also mentioned some of the points that I'm going to give you today. They affirmed that all the people throughout our life cycle, all of us as people need to receive care, and we're capable of caregiving in our vital cycle, in all the stages of life, when we're born, and as seniors, when we have a health condition, when we're in a situation of disability. And Social Security, understanding the concept, the broad concept of Social Security, as we've discussed it in this panel, the broader sense of the concept is Social Security is not just a right of paid labor. I mean, but that's Social Security. But we're responsible of caregiving in this collective. This is why, of course, we have a clear idea. We've been working on the materialization of this idea in Latin America. It's caregiving, which is the fourth pillar of social well-being. So the definition of the concept of the Inter-American Conference on Social Security defines Social Security, I mean, is aligned, is tuned. I'm not going to read the concept, the definition of Social Security, but I want to highlight a few points and ideas about Social Security as a human right that pretends to enable us to contribute to this well-being at an individual level and at a collective level. So the information that we have sourced from our region, as the previous panel members mentioned, is the following. You spoke about the differences, the lack of equality that we women are facing in Social Security. You know, we are vulnerable because there's a lack of pensions and Social Security. If we analyze the pension schemes and the specs or the specificity, and if we are discriminated as women in the system, in the payment schemes, and in the Social Security systems in general, the reality is that discrimination exists. It's not just a source of, it's not something that happens out of the blue. I mean, a while ago, some people said that women are responsible of their elections, of what they decide. It's like free will. We decide on what to do during our productive age or years. And that's, we see the rates of it in our region, but we have to talk about this reality. There's discrimination in our realities. There's a lack of fairness. If we analyze the cases of women out in the field, peasants, and in Social Security, what happens in Social Security with us women is like it depends on politics and the distribution of resources. When we see the reasons behind the lack of equality, the reasons are, as Teresa mentioned, we know that women have suffered a lack of economic autonomy. Women suffer poverty in their last stage of life. You have to think about the types of subjects that exist. People who work as feminists, we always think about women in the sexual disparity due to gender, and which are the outputs of the system. Clearly the life cycle of women and men is very different because of this sexual difference in correlation to labor. There's subjects that are regulated and not regulated, and there's elements that create this lack of equality as well for all of us. So the results in the lack of fairness in the field of Social Security with gender perspective leads us to analyze the critical points. We analyze caregiving and gender issues at the workforce, or discrimination at the workforce because we're women. So as Nadine said, the tasks of caregiving in society are seen as a priority, and that work is given to women. It's a critical point that triggers the lack of equality. We know we are women, and we've been the ones who are in charge of caregiving at the household in different dimensions. As you know, we've mentioned that labor of care is a segment of the household that doesn't receive a salary, but it sustains, that caregiving effort sustains what we do. There's research cases in ONU Mujeres, as Teresa said, and the data from CEPAL and other researchers have proven what I'm saying with a lot of clarity. The workload of caregiving is disproportionate at the household because the burden of it falls into women from the earliest stages of life, and that puts women at a disadvantage throughout a lifetime, and that explains the disadvantages throughout the life cycle. This affects us as women, and it keeps affecting us in the last stages of life. There's elements or factors that mark the differences when a person tries to access the labor market or the workforce. You see, we analyze law and rights and access to Social Security and its benefits and the protection of the state and Social Security in general. But precisely if we speak about this point, I believe that another colleague will speak about the studies of Laura. Laura Pautasi is going to continue speaking about her research, and Flavia Marco will explain clearly how Social Security systems include systematically the work that's unpaid for and not acknowledged. Labor of care is substantive. It's necessary for society, for the reproduction of our societies and the creation of a workforce in general. What predominates in the studies, or many of the case studies in which Laura, Flavia, and other researchers got, is that Social Security is that capacity to see what's happening. It's androcentric. That's like male-centric. I mean, there's women that work without pay, and they don't have the benefits of Social Security because they're working without pay now, and they're not acknowledged because of that labor of care. That's the kickoff point to start the debate, to discuss how can we incorporate labor of care in Social Security. If women are caregivers and work at the household for the household to be sustained and society to be sustained, then for society to survive and be sustainable, sustainable. Women are taking on that load, and in many of the cases, we're completely unprotected as women. Social Security does not benefit women. Of course, there's some advancements with, I mean, of course, we've seen that. I've seen that in my lifetime of work, but we've seen movements of feminists in year 2000, and then there were some subjects discussed in public agendas in Argentina and other countries in Latin America. Of course, we've lobbied generating progress. We've had open dialogue and acknowledged the fact that the labor of care is important. I mean, we have this important conference of one of the experts in the panel, who is Laura Pautasi, but what's clear to us is that we want to continue working together and understand which are the measures that correct in public policy the labor of care. We need to acknowledge it for Social Security, and we need to discuss this, debate things, and incorporate labor care and sexual differences due to gender at the workplace. I mean, that's still an ongoing issue. It's still something that affects us in a region. I mean, there's differences because of gender, and that's customary. Right now, we have the opportunity in this time frame to work and create something positive. I mean, amidst the pandemic, we need to show what's happening in this core subject, labor of care. Those who couldn't see how important it is to acknowledge those who are caregivers. I mean, the pandemic really moved us all. It changed so many things. Our day-to-day life was modified, and the everyday certainty that we have about how we're structured or organized, many things have changed, you know. We continue working at home. Amidst the pandemic, we can open in Latin American economies. We open ourselves to understand the role of government or the state and what happens with the legislative exercise of the drafting of public policies. Now, before the pandemic, we faced certain situations, but now, I mean, they were numbed. In the pandemic, these subjects have, enabled us to continue the debate with a stronger stance here. There's public policy.
On top of this, it was very clear, as it was before and during the pandemic, all the consequences of some of the current economic models that are applied in our region. And they have deepened inequalities. And from this point of view, maybe it is the perfect context to start putting this idea of social protection as universal in Latin America, based on the premise of well-being and collective well-being as the condition for a truly democratic society on the table, and to not go over time. I would like to mention something that is in the agenda, which is the social pact or social agreement that puts in its center solidarity and interdependence as the element to build a more just system. If we talk about interdependency, we have to place care at the center, care for life in its broadest definition, everything that refers to people and individuals. And I think that from that point, we can start the debate on Social Security and social protection that puts care in the center of the discussion and places care as a right and as a pillar of well-being systems and as a condition for well-being, both for individuals and for societies. I believe that this is what is happening in Latin America, which is displacing previous conversations that focused on marketing what is public and common, where we also saw the trend to market care that the pandemic seems to have clarified that the state has to provide, as is the case with other Social Security topics. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much for addressing our audience. We have this main topic, how to incorporate care into Social Security. How will we assimilate this as a human right and place care as a human right? Before we go to our keynote presentation, Professor Gassman has to leave. We thank her for being with us. Thank you very much. And now we will hear from our keynote presentation, Laura Pautasi. She holds a PhD on law and is member of the Law and Social Research Institute of the Law School of the Buenos Aires University. She is a specialist in gender, human rights, and public policy. Thank you, Dr. Pautasi, for your many contributions regarding care. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to this celebration of the 80th anniversary of SEAS. I would like to acknowledge Lourdes Jimenez for having created this debate within Social Security. Thank you, Lourdes, for all the debate that you are creating within the conference with these partnership for care. And as it was mentioned by my previous colleagues, both Teresa and Karina, we once again celebrate the opportunity of establishing this articulation that is necessary between human rights and care and Social Security. I would like to share a presentation now to talk about the topics that I planned and to start thinking how we can overcome this controversy on the right for care and Social Security. Lourdes mentioned that 80 years had to pass for this topic to be the center of debates, and that makes us realize of the controversy that exists. That is why I created this presentation to focus on these fields. The first topic refers to what both Nadine Gassman and Teresa and Karina mentioned, the fact that the field work is much more wider than other occupations. So far, this is the field that considers Social Security effects. This is why it's important to start thinking that we call work not just productive work, but also reproductive work. The initial definition from the sociology of care, where Karina has worked a lot on, and also based on the more modern definition from our colleagues, the feminists, about the economy of care. But there's also something very important that we're going to be discussing: volunteer work, work dedicated for other people not within our family unit, that is not remunerated. And this concept of work, we need to place it first in a greater dimension beyond productive work, employment and occupation, but also comprising the many discriminations that exist. This dichotomy between productive and reproductive work that have taken place throughout the whole 20th century, as stated by the feminist colleagues, and stated in many works in Latin America, will refer to two main spheres in feminist analysis: the public versus the private spheres. These worlds many times in controversy that refers to the distribution of tasks. They have had many contributions based on the frontiers between the public and private spheres, but also how these borders focus on labor relations and a framework based on structural inequalities. In the field of labor relations, since many decades ago in Latin America, since the 1980s, the massive participation of women in the paid labor field caused many discriminations, and this participation that has been sustained throughout decades has made it possible for the lack of incorporation of males in care tasks. But now, in this region, in this post-pandemic scenario, the participation conditions of women in paid work are more adverse and in worse conditions because of lack of formality and discrimination. But not just discriminations are shown in these fields, but in Latin America and the Caribbean, we see mechanisms that hinder the way women achieving leadership positions, and this causes horizontal and vertical lack of access. The known glass ceiling phenomenon is placed in addition to the muddy floor that holds women in these least qualification tasks, but also the development of glass cliffs where women are exposed or they are enabled to access work in tasks where it is highly likely that they will fail. And these cliffs, together with broken staircases and many metaphors that academia has used, is also part of the demands from feminists that state how the conditions of paid work are adverse for women. But there is another factor that will operate on this that relates to the differentiation between genders. The number of children has no impact in males. It has a positive differential effect regarding the establishments for Social Security, but this is not the case for women. This paid work field is also characterized by discrimination against the transgender persons, and as it was mentioned in the previous panel, they operate in a cross-sectional way. These work relations are also pierced by care relations, the structures of inequality, and as it was mentioned in this panel, the inequality, the fact that this is the most unequal continent on Earth. We use the way we can measure the gap between income and wealth. That is, dividing those between those who have and those who have not. and the unjust sexual division of work and care make our continent with the highest inequality. And this inequality, because of the incorporation of women in the paid work field that consolidated their incorporation into the public sphere, trap them in the private sphere because, as I mentioned, males, in the way that they organize in a paternalistic and maternalistic way, focusing on heterosexual families and nuclear families, males didn't assume their care responsibilities. And in the 21st century, the inequalities exploited in the agenda. Those that were trapping women in these spheres without institutional mechanisms, without having time and infrastructure and income. And also, I'm going to be addressing one of the objectives now. They related to one of the historic elements that influenced the relations of care. There is inequality, productive division, and nowadays in the region, it is highly current to have those consideration, and this is taken by assistance public policies of a male provider and a female carer. And this is sustained in the naturalization of women to provide care. Feminism has proven since many decades ago, I dare say centuries, that there is no natural thing, but rather a social construct. And this is one of the mechanisms that is pierced by sexual genetic reasons that create these power asymmetry. What has been the wish of many groups to change is this asymmetry between men and women and other sexual identities. There is an unfair division of work and naturalization of this supposed capability of women to care. We see the historic regimes in the region that are focused on families, and it is well known, and this is literature that is not always consulted. This institutionality that the care responsibilities are consigned, given, and positioned with a value way for women. And the fourth element that we need to take into consideration are the socioeconomic experiences that are stratified, where the possibility of care mechanisms will depend on the ability to gain incomes in the family. And when we talk about families, nothing is equally divided in households. And now we talk about another big field of the controversial relations between contributions and non-contributions, inspired by the Carmelo Mesa Lagos definition on Social Security regimes. The pioneering countries, especially the ones in the South that focused on European models, they set out their work from the merit point of view. Merit was achieved to income, the formal salaried activity that was, of course, focused on white heterosexual males. And these focus on families, this unfair division of labor prevailed in the region, and it is still deeply rooted. And the contribution within Social Security is a valid relation, and it is important to see there how these matrices considered the white heterosexual male as provider and the women, the wife, as the one in charge for care, and her income together with children and the parents of that provider was not done willingly, but rather due to the link with that salaried worker. And this had an impact on Social Security, evidently, and evidently to hereditary wealth. Wives do not receive protection not because of the recognition of that non-paid work, but because of these hereditary title based on the relation with the male. And this is important. This is something that we need to review and clearly transform with this gender perspective, because those caring women that were not just left outside of the labor field have and suffer these punitive effects. And this merit-based matrix of provider and workers today in our Social Security standards, their participation is linked to the fact that on her, the care responsibilities will fall over. Another limitation that we need to take into account is the discussion related to contingencies. This concept that Social Security has been evolved from calling them family load or burden, and then the expansion of the family unit still continues to have risk linked to working women. Social Security was based on protecting precisely the worker in her capability as a mother, that is, in her potential as a mother, and not workers in the full exercise of her rights, not affording the same rights and same opportunities to assume care to male and female workers. We also need to review the concept of risk, and this is an invitation to review all of the contributions that the feminist theory has given the work of Joan Drumbo. Risk may appear differently in a society organized around care. Mind you, this is a very interesting thing in terms of what Social Security covers, but also in relation to the concept of risk. And that's why I invite you to review this work. We have been talking about different definitions of care, which lets us see that even if we see this pattern of not being visible and the contingency of protecting in a trickle-down effect from male to other members of the family, civil society, civil law didn't define this concept of care. It's a polysemic concept. The work of Nancy Woolry mentioned that the polysemic meaning of this term contributed to its dissemination. And if while both parents have the obligation of caring for their children, it only gave custody, and this has also been evolving. We have been talking about parental obligations, yet there are still many examples of this, but parents still don't care for their children. I'm going to be talking more about this to cover the tax law. But what happened about in terms of labor? Well, it happened what I mentioned before, the protection of pregnancy mainly, and especially guaranteeing breastfeeding. This has been due to the evolution of agreements at the ILO until the 50s, which protected the potential of women to become mothers and the capability of caring for descendants. And until the 50s, they started having these agreements that were not consistent until today. And thanks to the protection of laws, and this is clearly related to the role of the Declaration of 79 about the rights of women, and the mandatory effect and the conventionality topic has not been enough to guarantee equality. These right to work legislation and the regulation of Social Security focuses on three protection frameworks: time, and the central mechanisms have been the mechanisms for leaves, but maternity leaves for having children are one thing, but many very little countries consider leaves due to adoption, and they don't afford them to same-sex couples or people who can have babies. ILO recommendations in terms of number of weeks for these leaves. Males get between 2 to 5 days per birth, which is an important asymmetry in comparison to the possibility of males exercising this responsibility for cares. There are other countries like Uruguay, which is noticeable for having increased leave for male, and they have to be mandatory because of practice. And as it was mentioned in the panel, because of the cultural shift that needs to take place, very few males dedicate their time to these care responsibilities. The next realm relates to infrastructure, where we talk about linked care, but Latin American norms have considered the mandatory nature of the provision of these cares to women, and regarding money, all transfer mechanisms to salaried work. As Karina mentioned, and Elena Huerta, and the work of Giacometti, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Spain, and Uruguay, the countries that have the most benefits for maternity and paternity leaves, let us see that the measures have been the most important ones that have represented a mind shift are isolated because they haven't created these transformation and cultural shifts, but also they haven't been included in the organizational logic, except for some countries that have improved in terms of care. But because they have incorporated this in their system, and there is a null effort to include excluded women. And just To give you a few examples, if we see this graph that comes from this study, women who are not holders of Social Security because of children is noticeable. In the case of Bolivia, the percentage of women who are not members of Social Security is 66%, but those who have 4 or more children reaches 92%. And in cases like Uruguay, that has moved forward in these systems, 9% of women are not covered, but in comparison to those who have been covered, those who have more than one child, 44% are not covered by these measures. In the case of Bolivia, for example, in terms of impact, this widening of percentage of women receiving pensions, solidary pensions, regardless of the number of children, especially for women older than 65, has allowed to transform the perception of income in women, which until recently, according to ECLAC, 30% of the region who don't have their own income, these measures have benefited them. And when we see the total impact, it only reaches 2.6% of women over 60 in the case of Bolivia. In the case of Chile, which we see with a broader tradition in terms of transformation and reforms related to pension regimes or systems, we see that the amount and the measures taken per child are important, but the impact, in terms of the impact, we see that it only covers 8.66%. It increases a little bit more if we talk about survival pension, but the percentage of women and the request of the bonus per child in the Chilean case, there is a basic solidarity pension, and this amounts to 80%, and only 54% refers to the bonus per child. This is a recent work by Professor Mesa Lago that talks about these reforms, reforms efforts that have not been finished, which relates to the previous debate related to the controversy between contribution work and non-contribution work, and all those promises that took place in the 90s, and many of the efforts in this century that showed that, first of all, there was no incorporation of gender equality in these reforms. There were not even promises, and that is not the main issue as it was stated. So we need to analyze the Mesa Lago work to see all the other factors that relate to a higher discussion in terms of Social Security that says that work problems not just depend on that coverage, because there has been an increase in the ratio of economically active people, yet the problems, the intrinsic problems related to inequality have to be taken into account. And lastly, we have one last field, and I'm going to be focusing on the right to work. In the field of social protection regulation, there are important improvements in terms of the income-conditioned transfer programs, but they haven't included care infrastructure or linking the beneficials of these systems. We haven't even defined a transfer program for these dynamics. We have an important deficit on this. So not in social protection, where a big part of the transfer acknowledges the permanence of formal work and incorporating and controlling health checks. And this is a punitive system in many countries where the transfer in the face of these two inconsistencies, yet there hasn't been progress on incorporating mechanisms that facilitate care in relation to these programs. These fourth pillar for social well-being require an important boost in the region and agendas that establish this care logic. I'm not going to talk too much in depth about this because this has already been presented, that we can't say that we don't know what care is in Social Security. If the pandemic left us with a lesson, is that everyone in the planet knows now what happens in households. Talking about their link with Social Security, we have important definitions both regarding care work, indirect work, and direct work. The coining of the well-being diamond, which includes the state, families, and community. We have the contribution from feminist studies regarding care and the economy of care that allow us to see all the economic wealth produced in households. Care systems, the care society, which is where all countries are jumping on board. This year in the convention that we're going to have in Buenos Aires next month, the mechanisms to advance women together with UN agencies and civil society focus on this. But I would like to stop on care because it is a human right, just as Social Security is. Why is it defined as a human right? Because if we apply human rights in all pacts and international agreements, but also in our interpretation of the human rights system, care is included in the definition of a dignified life as the right to be cared for, the right to care. And this will imply positive and negative obligations that include states. We don't have a challenge, we have an obligation over states, and this notion that care is a human right, as Social Security is appears by this right to care for and be cared for. And this follows the same human rights focus. Universality, access to justice in the broader sense, and this helps the dissemination of care and citizen empowerment. This common matrix that is acknowledged in the first international agreements from CEDAW on, that was not called care, but since the International Convention of Disabled People and in the Inter-American Convention to Protect Human Rights of Senior Citizens, from 2015, we have an explicit definition. But this regional conference on women in Latin America was the ideal framework to include the acknowledgement of care being a human right. This is also the case of constitutions of Ecuador and Bolivia, who do not acknowledge this as a human right, but they do define paid work and unpaid work. The Mexico City Constitution from 1917 included definition for care. Hopefully it will be approved. And the Chilean constitution that was not approved, unfortunately, in the plebiscite, acknowledged this as a human right. This takes us to the interdependency of rights, which is stated in the platform and action program of the Human Rights Conference in Vienna. Therefore, this right to care incorporates the grouping of all the rights that have to be guaranteed comprehensively and independence of other rights. It is linked with the right to health, food, social security, education, conciliation with responsibility, and it's a universal right.
And to finish, clearly we are in a scenario where this it's consecrated to the parts of international. Also, in the Corpus Interpretative, we have constitutional tribunals in the case that it has been acknowledged as a human right. And we are not facing a challenge in the incorporation of the framework of debates of Social Security and the regulation of Social Security. We are clearly before certain obligations that refers to the scenario of transformation that require this unevenness, this structural unevenness with respect to the sexual division of work and care, and also for a deep revision of the discriminations of Social Security as a whole. We will have to think again the work and the acknowledgement distribution to know the fields, and from the concepts of interdependence of human rights, obligations in the field of civil and political rights, along with the economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights. And this has to be taken in an intersectional way in order to have the central nucleus of the discussion of Social Security, along with the conditions of people which are migrants, disabled persons, and also in diverse techniques. So we require production, access to information, the feminist chain that produces certain studies, and the organizations are producing very important studies along all this debate that we have seen, a great part of this information. So what we need to advance on is to universalize the availability, the accountability, the work, paid or not, and necessary resources with respect to Social Security. We must think that this paradigm of solidarity that was established in the Social Security system should not be changed for a paradigm of sorority and thinking of new pacts, as we said on this table. We have to know not only in minimum spaces where we do frequently, but in the maximum benefits. This is the great mandate of human rights, and we have to rethink other arrangements, maybe the universal ones, to discuss in the scenario post-pandemic and this concept of new normal, that in reality this new normal is not a desirable road because it affected by structural unevenness that pandemic has deepened, and we need public policies which transform ourselves in every field: education, health, Social Security, and the acknowledgement of the care that it's a human right, also as Social Security that has obligations and implies immediate obligations, and they need, and we need, standards of gender, human rights, quality, equity, and I could go on in the rest of these facts, but I'll stop now in order to habilitate the Q&A session. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Dr. Pautas, a specialist researcher in terms of human rights and public policies. Thank you so much for this keynote conference and all your contributions and for your generosity. Now I know that everyone are asking ourselves if we're going to achieve on time, and we'll listen to the specialists. I'm sorry to the representatives of the institutions of Social Security that are part of the conference. We want to give you the opportunity that in some minutes you can talk about the actions with respect to the care and Social Security that are enforced in your countries, or you can also use your time in order to react to so many things that we have put and we have set on the table in this relationship of care and Social Security. First of all, I'm going to pass the floor to Virginia Marlene Garcia Reyes, General Director of the National Institute of Social Security in Cuba. Thank you so much, Virginia, for accepting to participate in this panel, and I'll give the floor. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity of participating here in the panel. And I would not like to start my intervention without congratulating the CISS for the 80th anniversary, the president, and also to thank on behalf of the Cuban government and the representatives of Cuba, Mexico that is here with us today, the effort, the support of the Mexican government in facing all the facts occurred recently in the base. And want to acknowledge the effort of everyone in the support of our debts. With respect to the project of non-paid work that we are holding in the country, and I want to be on time, Lourdes, and I hope that I would achieve it. We already established in our country this project that has a legal support in the Constitution of the Republic, in the ideas of concepts and the Congress of the Party, the program of development, and also, as you can see, in the program of women that recently was pronounced in the country. This project is within the program of human development, equity, and social justice that has several organizations implied as the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Public Health, and also the Ministry of Work, where we have two programs, one of dignified work and the other one of social prevention. Inside the working program of dignified work is the promotion and access to works of quality, the non-paid project, and the coverage and sustainability project of social security. So which are the conceptual bases upon which we have worked in this project? First of all, we have the concept that we were talking about, the concept of non-paid work, and also it has the characteristics that it conforms a non-paid work that marks exactly the home office or the homes, the communities, people, and society. We're going to frame fundamentally this explanation in the domestic household, which is what we have talked until now of care, that fundamentally is where we center this project of Cuba. We have as a history that the same moment where the Cuban Revolution in the year 59 started, and we start creating initiatives that will detect the problems that there exist with respect to this, and also to project solutions, and first of all are oriented to favor the access and the incorporation of women to employment, that the ones that are looking to alleviate the domestic load and decrease the time destined to this, and the ones that are heading to strengthen the frameworks of legal protection of the workers, mainly mothers, and the transformation of the division of work by gender. I want to also tell you that recently we stated a new law project that favors also that the care works internally in the household, gives the possibility to the parents, the grandparents, and the uncles in order to be in charge of the care of the children. We are talking about the minors or the elderly as well. These are two areas that women generally has the main role. This is a curious data, and according to the information of the National Office of Information and Statistics of Cuba, in the year 2021, only 16 men all over the country started with the benefits of the license of paid maternity, which means that women are in charge of taking care of the children until they are 1 year old. This gives us that we are born to take care of. Unfortunately, it's like so. In the background, all the initiatives have a favorable impact in the empowerment process experienced by Cuban women. However, an economic situation that unfortunately declined this project. And before this reality, of course, we have to potentiate a better co-responsibility at a social level with the participation of different actors, the family, community, the state, the governments, and also the organizations with this objective. Within the program for women that I was talking about that was enforced recently in Cuba, this program conforms a unique document that gathers the policies in order to promote the advance of women, the equality of rights, opportunities, and possibilities contained in the Constitution of the Republic, and it incorporates this program and the topic of care when they try to improve and increase the services that are rendered among the families. It promotes the effort, the community efforts and institutionals in their work, and it also exhorts and summons to create the conditions to increase economically the contribution economically in the family. This is an important element that I want to highlight in the specific case of Cuba. The work has the possibility of receiving a protection because no one is left behind in Cuba. There is a protection by the general regime or the complementary regime of social attendants, and the specific case of the caretakers that work for so long or for some time and then devoted to the care of elderly, mainly taking into account the aging of the population, are protected by the Social Security through a special availability that gives the way to grant the right to pension outside of the requisites of law. So in some way or the other, these caregivers will have right to be protected either by Social Security to certain functions or through the social attendants that will protect the nucleus as of the economic incomes. It means that social protection is guaranteed in one way or another to this caretaker. According to the National Program of Women Empowerment, we also have to make educational actions of sensitization and training for the families in general, which is a very important aspect because it takes the fibers of the people of the community to sensitize the population with respect to this, and also the participation of men in the struggle for equality, their role in the care activities, the shared responsibilities. It was a topic that we were talking a while ago, the prevention of the different ways of gender violence and the aspect of diversity. Within the diagnosis that we performed for this project, we detected, of course, the topic of aging, demography aging, that impacts not only Cuba, but many countries of the region. In the 2020, for every 1,000 people between 15 and 50 years old, there were 589 with expected activity, which are under 14 years old and over 60 years old. The prognosis for 2030 is estimated in 807 persons for every 1,000, and the reduction of the average size of homes 2.9 in 2015 to 2.7 in year 2030. Approximately the 17.4% of elderly live by themselves, which is a phenomenon that is repeated practically in every province of the country. And of course, it compels the people economically active that they have to devote to the care of the elderly, and they are their families, so they affect the economy of the country because it's fundamentally about the people that have a scientific degree that can contribute with economic and social development, but they get away from the active life in order to take care of their grandsons, of children with disabilities, severe or moderate, and so forth. Also, the diagnosis was talking about the institutional systems in order to cover the services of the care of the infants because they are very scarce in Cuba, and also the staff devoted to this work of taking care of children in state institutions, also with the experience in the program of protection. And that is today devoted to take care of mothers with children with severe disability and also the protection of elderly people, but the state doesn't have the needed structure in order to have the care in retirement houses, and they impact the rural areas that we're talking about a panel where there are very few institutions that render these services. The non-existence of a training program for the people devoted to this care. The National Survey of Aging of the Population of 2017 said that of every 100 women that didn't work for any cause, it should be over 26.3%. They did it for the need of providing care. This is what is important. We have to create in the region institutions that are devoted to train the caretakers, and this is an important aspect, and we have not talked about this, and I want to talk about is the disease of the caretaker, this person that devoted for so many years to be a caretaker. They have pathologies, physical, mental, and whatever, and this disease of the caretaker, we have to take attention because he goes to be a caretaker, to be a person that should be taken care of. So here, the fundamental objective and the specific objectives, and within the specific objectives, we have to acknowledge the economic value, to increase the services, the co-responsibility, and to strengthen the welfare of the legal protection. And I want to stop in the main actions that we're going to perform in order to be able to have this ambitious project. And as you saw at the beginning, it has the possibility of having the cooperation of other institutions, national institutions. First of all, we project to create the basis for a national system for the comprehensive care of the person, and we have to identify demands of care offers, alliances possible or existent in different institutions, the ways of property, and also the economic actors, to have a system of indicators for the adaptation of the statistics about non-paid work and the services that we have in this objective in the country, and that allow us to make visible the contributions to the social and economic activity, to have a study about this non-paid work, that it creates national data disaggregated by sex, age, skin color, territory, and we have to elaborate a methodology destined to the non-paid work, to the GDP, to support in the municipal governments, that this is very important, the creation and articulation of initiatives that are headed to the support of workers that are not paid or paid, to reestablish services in order to support non-paid work at the municipal level, to create funds for incentives to the companies and institutions that support actions of co-responsibility and the demand of their workers, to foster campaigns of welfare about care with the focus of state of right, intersectional, feminist, and interdisciplinary, that include aspects that are relative to care, to increase and to widen the scope of the protection measures that favor welfare and economy of the people that are devoted to non-paid work, to perform a process of training to people of the different government instances in topics that are relative to the features of the care systems, with the focus of the feminist right, intersectional and interdisciplinary, that will include the self-care among their topics, and to understand the different spheres for caretakers of elderly through state initiatives or other organizations headed to this transition of people that will render these services. So I give you here the interrelationship of this program with the different structures, the different bodies, in order to have it as a reference and the main guideline of the 8th Congress of the Party of the Cuban state that are also related with this project. And with this, I mean that the state of the Cuban government will render and will keep on rendering the greater attention to this topic of non-paid work, and mainly to the attention to the primary care of children and elderly people in all over the country. Thank you very much. Congratulations for so many actions with respect to care in your country. Now I'll pass the floor to Eugenia Ramirez, the director of the Ecuadorian Institute of Social Security. Thank you, Enya. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Before I start, I want to invite you to the conference in these 80 years and to go hand in hand with Laura, what she was saying at the beginning of the keynote talk about this reproductive work. In so many countries is being considered, and I want to give this positive news on the part of Ecuador that since the year 2015 included a special regime inside the Social Security, the Ecuadorian Institute of Social Security, in order to finance the pensions of this segment of the population that has not been considered. So here, this is a very short presentation. I'm going to be brief due to time. I don't know if you can help me or if I can share it from here. see it there. Thank you. So what I was telling you, we have a special regime in the year 2015 by a law, the organic law for labor and the acknowledgement of work at home.
This law, what it enunciates, and it was implemented in the Social Security Agency, were benefits in certain services during the age Montepío and funerary services due to the fact that healthcare services are under the coverage of the Ministry of Public Health. When there's a pension or financing of special schemes, there's 13.25%. That's the percentage, that's the contribution. It's important to go to the next slide. We have different levels of subsidy from the government, and I'll explain the subsidy. There's 4 levels. The first level of the subsidy, which exists, is for those people who earn less than 25% of the unified minimum wage in Ecuador. That number is $425. So for this level or threshold, the central government has to subsidize almost 10.99% of that fee. And at that threshold, or in that level, the contribution and the subsidy is lower, we can, or the people can receive 19% of the unified basic wage. In the second threshold, you have a 27% of the unified basic wage. In the third level, 39%. And in the fourth level or type, 52%. If we could continue, next slide, please. Now here in the presentation, what you can see what I was just telling you. The first level is for those who earn less than 25% of the unified basic wage, and this is the fee of contribution, or the percentage. Currently, this is $106.26. The second level is up to 50% of the basic unified income, which currently will reach $202.50. Third type or level reaches 75% of the basic unified wage, and I mean to say this translates to $328.25. And the last level, that's 100% of the basic unified income, is 42% that's the fee or the margin. What's subsidized here. That's what's important. In the first type of level, there's 10.99% of subsidy from government, and the payment of the beneficiary or the people that are classified in this segment is 2.26%. In the second type or level, the government subsidizes 7.75% or 95%, and the payment of the beneficiary is 5.30. In the third type, the government will subsidize 5.95%. And the beneficiary pays 7.30. And the last type, when the income is over 150% of the basic unified wage, the person's contribution is 13.25%. Now here in this slide, you can see the behavior, the trend since 2015 till the present. In that incremental graph, you can see that the beneficiaries have increased. Those who have access to the benefits of the institutions have multiplied. You see how many times? 57 times. So you see the distribution per gender. 99% of the people that are part of the household or labor care are females, and then 1% are males at the household. But the age group here is centered on those who are 31 up to 40. In the sample of the population, we have over 100,000 people that are part of this scheme or regime. Thank you so much. This is basically a summary. We recap what we've compiled since 2015 in the Equator to protect the work at home, the laborers, the caregivers at home, and unpaid jobs. I mean, I want to mention something that's extremely important. Those who work at the household and receive a payment are also included in the regulations of the Equator. They have to receive all the benefits of Social Security if they're made at home. Even if they're there, I mean, they have all the rights and services. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Social Security from Equator for your sharing this program. We compared your program to the existing programs in the region. You protect most of your population. You're talking about coverage of those who are caregivers. As a conclusion, the word is now for Mr. Jose Adolfo. He is part of the Equatorian Social Institute. Thank you, Lourdes. Good afternoon to you all. Thank you. And I'd like to thank this conference for celebrating the 80th anniversary. I was going to pre-record my greetings or my congratulations, but I'm here face to face. I'm the only one here that's of different gender from the panel members. I acknowledge all my panelists, my female panelists here. So I want to share my perspectives from Guatemala. Guatemala is a country with a high percentage of rural people or people who are living in the rural zones and their indigenous populations, and that's what predominates. We've identified what's customary. Women, due to gender, usually take care of what's happening at home and are not cared for at a personal level. This pattern is replicated in urban areas and not so much in cities. This pattern is somehow necessary for the population. There's some subjects that have some impact in the decision-making process. Some women don't have decision-making capacity or capacity there, and that's normalized in society, and there's a lack of reaction in an individual grounds of things being women, but we see how we're organized in the collective. According to the quantification of the population in our country, Guatemala has 17 point some million, over 17 million in population. 52% out of those millions are women. Out of those 17.1 million in population, 11.7 million are in the productive stage of life, and the population that's active is 7.4 million in our population. It's interesting that out of those 7.4 million in population, 63% of the economically productive population are males, and the rest are classified as women. 95% of the population in Guatemala is not over 64, and 59.5% of our population has not passed the 29 years of age. We're clearly a country packed with youth. Now, I've shared this hard data with you, and we've considered that if we go through the assessment of the statistics of the productive side of the population, definitely, we're not considering the productivity of unpaid labor here. The scalability and the proportion or the share or the percentage of unpaid labor are not even visualized in the economic indicators of our country, which is extremely worrying. The level of awareness that should increase from our side is that we must know how much is contributed by these people and discuss this in this conference. It's mandatory for us to raise awareness in the Social Security Institute, because we know that there's unpaid caregiving and household activities that are not paid for. The Guatemala Social Security Institute in 2019 launched a special program to protect the household workers or people that provide cleaning services at home. This program was an innovation back in 2009 because precisely that program was created because of a social demand. They required coverage and safety and services for the household members who are exercising their tasks. And from 2009 to 2021, we have registered only 527 people in the list of people who are unpaid there. Or paid. What does this mean? That we are not used to revealing what's happening in the households. We don't reveal the unpaid or paid household chores or domestic activities that are executed in the heart of our people's home. If we analyze what's happening in societies, as Virginia mentioned in anticipation, the caregiving of people at home and those who work at home, especially our seniors. If our seniors are working in the household, they don't get paid for it, but it's they're demanded to do that at the household. It's translated into money only when the caregiver gets sick and the family has to pay to hire a professional caregiver. Then it's translated into money, and we can monetize precisely the cost of that that unpaid caregiver. You know, the contribution, how we contribute to society is extremely important. The intrinsic values, although it's customary in society, emanate from the household and caregivers. Who educates caregivers? Who has the capacity of developing these caregivers? We have to acknowledge the existence. We have to consider them when drafting public policies. Ms. Pautasi mentioned in her presentation precisely, she mentioned all the conventions and the guiding principles and laws and regulations of civil causes, which are specifically drafted to include unpaid labor and care of different subjects who constitute the household here. But that's not enough. It's not enough to acknowledge these subjects in a substantive way. We have to raise awareness. We know that each one of us we have to be factors of change in our professional departments or units, in the different fields, and in our homes. We need to acknowledge them. In Guatemala, we have collective entities constituted by women in which we talk about caregivers. There's a lack of fairness and there's a broad gap. We have to narrow the gap. There's girls that are excluded from education and teenage or children's pregnancy. That's a problem. Therefore, it's a challenge. We include this in the public debate. We have to think about labor of care and unpaid labor that generates the lack of fairness. It's systematically done. We need to analyze the factors and understand the dimension of the impact. There's unpaid labor, and that generates structural problems historically. You know, sometimes we think this is normal, and that's just an assumption. You know, in a system, in this system, the systems of Social Security in Guatemala, we must consider that being inclusive and working in all our sectors. We need to work in all our sectors to include our people, our citizenship to social benefits, but that also depends on the contributions or fees to be paid. In Guatemala, due to the pandemic, and I've heard many of the examples, and I've lived throughout your experiences and shared in this forum, we raise awareness. We know we need to protect the migrant workers. We need to protect the workers at different offices or those who work from home remotely. I mean, we raised awareness when analyzing clear examples, when the shifts of home office weren't respected. There were long hours. There weren't strict check-ins or check-in times at the household or from home office. The employer had total control somehow of the employees. That's when the next was triggered. We triggered a field of research to raise awareness of the household activities that are unpaid. When we can compare the labor force back in another time frame and compare to what happens in the pandemic, people have long working hours. We know that long working hours are something that we study. There's unpaid people working at home, our seniors work at home, and all of this hard work that's unpaid enabled the people that are working out in the offices the capacity to execute their task. And this raises debate. How do we incorporate those subjects to the caregiving services of Social Security and its benefits? You know, labor care or care that's not paid for specifically that affects women has to be analyzed in multiple sectors. Social Security should enable and open the services and break that negative cycle in which most women are affected in our country. We have programs with gender perspective based on Social Security, which will catalyze as programs more opportunities and enable women to be regulated and become beneficiaries of opportunities and have access to Social Security systems in our country. And economics and politics in our country, we're extremely worried. We want to know how to incorporate the unregulated subjects to our system, but we still need to define the construct, the legal construct of the regulated or unregulated subjects. We're engaged. I know that hand in hand with the hard work of this Inter-American Conference and others, I know that this event called us all to participate. There's many stakeholders that watch over their universalization of access to social services that gives us the tools. This gives us the tools. In our country, we can dignify that hard work that's unpaid, that hard work. And we must acknowledge, there's fees, there's contributions, yes, there's amendments in law, in the fiscal or revenue law here in our country, so we can give our people access that's dignified. Access that's dignified. We have to give them those services. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jose Adolfo Gobierno Jaú, President of the Guatemalan Institute of Social Security. Thanks for being part of this conference. Thank you for sharing those tools that lead us to a transformation as a response in your country. Now, if we speak about the last two presentations, the word is for Ananda Limartel. She is Director of Employment and Social Development of Canada. Thank you, Natalie Martel, for your participation. Thank you so much, and I'll speak in English now. Como todos en el mundo, en Canadá, la informalidad en la proveeduría de trabajo, en las casas, hay niños y gente de la tercera edad que trabaja en los hogares, que juegan un rol fundamental.
compared to the true value of the work of caregivers. I'm going to start with Canada's public pensions because this is my field of expertise, and I also heard my colleagues mentioning that there is a lack of pensions for caregivers. The Old Age Security Program, which is the first pillar of Canada's retirement income system, is not based on contributions, but on residence, and is financed through tax revenues. It provides a basic level of income to all seniors aged 65 and over, along with additional support for those in low income. So employment history is not a factor in determining eligibility for old age security benefits. Not linking eligibility for the old age security pension with employment history has allowed senior women who had devoted their entire life to raising children and other caregiving responsibilities to have their own income at retirement. On the other hand, the Canada Pension Plan, the second pillar of Canada's retirement income system, provides partial income replacement for workers based on their contributions. While the Canada Pension Plan is financed by contributions from workers and employers, there are some measures under the plan to protect caregivers. For example, the child rearing provision allows parents to eliminate from their contributory period the amount of time they had to stop working to look after their children under the age of 7. So this provision ensures that they are not penalized for the periods of low earnings when their Canada Pension Plan benefits are calculated. Also, the general dropout provision allows to remove 8 years of low or zero earnings from a person's contributory period when calculating the amount of Canada Pension Plan benefits. This provides further protection against labor force interruptions. And finally, the credit splitting allows Canada Pension Plan pension credits earned by both spouses during the marriage to be divided equally in the event of separation or divorce. Credits can be divided even if one spouse did not make contributions to the plan. This may help someone who perform unpaid care work qualify for benefits. The Government of Canada has also implemented financial supports in the form of benefits and tax credits for those providing care for dependents, such as the caregiver tax credit, the employment insurance, caregiving benefits for those who must leave the workforce to provide care for someone. There's also the child disability benefit. That said, only one province in Canada provides an ongoing allowance for caregivers, which acts like a salary. The Government of Canada has also started implementing a Canada-wide childcare system so that all Canadian women have access to the affordable childcare they need to support their participation in the workforce. Also, investments are being made to address labor shortages in long-term care facilities as well as in home care. I will conclude my remarks with a few words on what Canada is doing on the international front. Canada has a feminist international assistance policy under which it has committed to take a feminist approach to help address unpaid care work issues and the disproportionate proportion of care shouldered by women and girls around the world. As was mentioned by my colleagues, there is a need to deepen our understanding of the value of unpaid care work and to promote care work as a shared responsibility between women and men and across households, the state, communities, civil society, and the private sector. Last year, our Prime Minister committed to provide $100 million in new funding to address issues in unpaid and paid care work in low and middle income countries in which Canada provides international assistance. This funding will help recognize, address, and reduce the unequal distribution of unpaid and paid care work and ensure that unpaid and paid care workers are represented and have their voices heard and their rights supported and protected. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie Martel, directora del Plan de Seguridad Social en Canadá. Just for closure, we're going to link remotely the representative of Barbados, Ms. Katrina Bell. Thank you so much. She's in Barbados.
Good evening, everyone, and congratulations on your 80th anniversary. I am speaking on behalf of the situation in Barbados, and I also bring greetings from our director, Ms. Kim Chitter. I'm the Marketing and Research Officer at the NIS in Barbados, and I can speak about care as it relates to unpaid workers. Well, unpaid care workers in Barbados, they do not contribute to the NIS. Therefore, they do not qualify to receive any of the benefits which we offer. However, if they're married, like the housewives, babysitters, grandmothers, what have you, if they're married and their spouse has died, then they will receive support in the form of survivor's benefit. And that can last their lifetime once they have not remarried. If there are unmarried children within that household when the spouse has died, these children can be supported up to age 16, and that support can continue up to age 25 once they have been studying, have not married or anything, and they are at an approved institution, an approved education institution. Of course, they will have to provide proof to the NIS that they are enrolled, and support will continue for them to pursue their education up until age 25. So when we look at the situation of unpaid care workers in Barbados, I would say that Barbados does provide an equal opportunity to both men and women in the workforce. You'll find we have female engineers here, we have females who also work in aviation, and those fields that were traditionally dominated by men. In Barbados, as persons have become more affluent, you have the females and the males working at the same time. So there has been a shift from paid care workers within the households. If you have the grannies there who take care of the children, they do that because they see that as their duty. It's a form of them to connect with family, a form of love. And in Barbados too, we are right now in our pension reform process. And discussions have been ongoing to increase the pensionable age from 67 up until 72. Hopefully, it doesn't go that far because since 2003, we have been offering early retirement to persons. And once they qualify, they can retire as early as age 60. So to come from that in 2003 up to age 72, we'll see if persons can adjust to that. But for sure, when we look at caregivers as well, we find that in Barbados, we have persons who are living longer. So we have as much as 60 centenarians. Some of them were housewives and so forth. They never would have contributed to the NIS, but we offer non-contributory pension to persons here if they are blind or they are deaf without speech starting from age 18. And for those persons that we offer non-contributory pension to, at least the old age pension, they have to be of pensionable age and Barbadian citizens. Now, these such persons, as I would have mentioned, there are about 60 pensioners in Barbados who receive that old age non-contributory pension. And these persons, all of them are 100 plus years old. So in Barbados, we have the declining workforce because we are not as reproductive as we used to be. And then we are losing persons overseas who emigrate for better, what they believe are better opportunities. So in Barbados, we don't really have such of a problem of unpaid care workers because lots of persons are out working. And those who do work within the household, private houses and so forth, they are paid. The employer needs to pay in their contributions. And once that has happened, when it comes time for they to get income in their time of need, whether they are sick or on maternity leave, or they were injured on the job, or they became unemployed at some point of time, they are covered by the NIS in Barbados. And I would have heard someone alluded to maternity benefit. I would also say that here, when a lady is having a baby and she does not qualify to receive the maternity benefit, and that maternity benefit is up to 12 weeks. So if she does not qualify, but she has her spouse who has met the qualifying conditions, then she can benefit from a maternity grant. The maternity grant is right now 1,260 Barbados dollars per week. Not per week, sorry, just a lump sum. And that is equivalent to, one moment please, I'm trying to find the US amount. That maternity grant of $1,126 is equivalent sorry, I don't have that calculation, but our currency is $1 equals $2. So that wouldn't be hard to calculate. However, I do have the equivalent for our non-contributory old age pension, which I would have mentioned earlier, and that is $115 per week, which is Barbados $230. So what we are encouraging those persons as well who are care workers, who do not get NIS benefits paid for them through their employer, they would have to come and register as a self-employed person and start to pay those benefits themselves. But sometimes we have a dilemma where they are told you have to work for these amount of hours and here is your pay, here is what you need to do. And what we deem as self-employed is that you work your own hours, you have your own tools, and you set the tone for your work. So we are trying to encourage as many persons out there who are caregivers, who do not get NIS contributions paid for them, to register as self-employed persons and make those contributions themselves, so that when they are in their time of need, whether they are sick, whether they need maternity benefit and so forth, that they are covered by the NIS. And if you go on our website, nis.gov.bb, you will see in our general features that we would have provided plenty of programs over the years to benefit both insured working and self-employed persons, starting from 1990. And we are still improving as we go along to try to see how best we can get everyone covered so that everyone benefits. And when they get old, they get their pension and so forth. Especially for the self-employed, we are having challenges to get them to register and to pay in those contributions. And within the pension reform program that we're undergoing right now, instead of asking them to pay every quarter, the minimum is 21 Barbados dollars a week. We may ask them to pay what you have, pay in a lump sum, pay when you are actually employed, because some self-employed persons work seasonally and casually, so they can pay in what they have so that they too are covered. So I would say that we are making strides, and we are continuing to improve the lives of what we call our care workers here, which would be our babysitters, our housewives, our persons who we consider domesticated, who would work in homes, who would work in nursing homes, nurseries, private homes, and so forth. We are continuing to offer better social security to them to improve their lives. And
area and the research area of the Inter-American Conference on Social Security. And to close, I would like to share the message that we're not going to wait 80 more years for Social Security to reach all that it should. Let's move to a reality that enforces human rights and the access to care for and be taken care of. Good afternoon, everyone.